I'll be reading from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. First up, this story is titled, Sheriff Hires Jail Guard Accused of Breaking Law. Monroe County Sheriff last year accused Michael Zamiara of felonies and misdemeanors. 6 months later, Erie County Sheriff John Garcia gave him a job anyway. Last spring, Monroe County's sheriff accused a sergeant in his jails division of illegally accessing confidential medical and internal affairs files more than 130 times. The sergeant resigned before he could be punished. Less than 6 months later, Erie County Sheriff John Garcia hired him as a part-time guard at the county jail in Alden. Garcia's office has refused to discuss the hiring. Michael Zamiara, according to a 2025 investigation obtained by Investigative Post, illegally accessed medical records 5 times and internal affairs files 137 times. He did not have permission or authority to do so, according to departmental charges leveled against him in April 2025. Accessing the medical files constituted a felony, while accessing the other files amounted to a high-level misdemeanor, investigators for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office concluded. Both classes of crimes can result in fines and prison sentences. Zamiara's actions also violated the internal policies of the Sheriff's Office. Zamiara, 43, was neither charged nor disciplined. Instead, he was first placed on paid leave while the Monroe County Sheriff's Office investigated, 3 sources told Investigative Post. He was then permitted to resign. The Sheriff's Office never charged Zamiara, nor made any referrals to the Monroe County District Attorney, according to spokespeople for both agencies. In November, Erie County Sheriff John Garcia hired Zamiara as a correctional officer. He's currently assigned to the county jail in Alden. The part-time salary is $18,945 per year, according to a March payroll record obtained by Investigative Post. In 2024, Zamiara made $121,965 working for Monroe County. Rachel Barnhart, a Monroe County legislator, said that the case raises numerous questions that neither Garcia nor Monroe County Sheriff Todd Baxter have answered. We don't know what Monroe County told Erie County, if anything, Barnhart said. There are so many questions here. These are alleged crimes. Why weren't the authorities notified that this happened? This didn't just happen once. This happened dozens of times. Neither Zamiara nor Baxter responded to requests for interviews from Investigative Post. In a statement, David Marcucci, a spokesperson for Baxter, said the sheriff's office conducted a thorough and lengthy investigation, that the sheriff proceeded with the disciplinary process, but that Zamiara resigned during the disciplinary phase of the internal investigation. Asked why the sheriff's office never charged Zamiara, despite finding that he had broken the law, Marcucci said the department conducted an internal investigation only, which he said carries a lower evidentiary burden than a criminal investigation. Callie Marionetti, a spokesperson for the Monroe County District Attorney, said the sheriff's office never referred the case for prosecution. Garcia, the Erie County Sheriff, did not respond to an emailed interviewed request or to a message left on his cell phone. Christopher Hovadis, a spokesperson for Garcia, also declined to comment on the hiring. He said in an email statement, the Erie County Sheriff's Office, quote, conducts a robust background investigation of each job applicant, unquote, including administering a test, checking an applicant's criminal history, and speaking with their former employers. Jason Haynes, a retired Monroe County Sheriff deputy who had his medical files accessed by Zamiara, told Investigative Post he remains unsatisfied. He said Baxter's administration did not properly investigate Zamiara. I'm pissed off, man. He went into my files, Haynes said. You gave him another job down the road. To me, that's just corruption right there. That's not discipline. Who is Michael Zamiara? 3 Monroe County Sheriff sources who spoke with Investigative Post described Zamiara as an ally of Baxter who the sheriff protected. Hired in 2005, Zamiara was a jail deputy who rose to sergeant over the past 2 decades. The sources said, however, that Zamiara earned a reputation for nitpicking colleagues' work and, quote, creating a hostile work environment, unquote. He was usually on the radar of jail administration, one source, a retired sheriff's deputy, told Investigative Post. They were always at odds, so the sheriff reassigned him to himself. Zammiara began serving as sheriff's coordinator in January 2022. His deputies included co-hosting Baxter's podcast, Behind the Badge. His predecessor in that role, Captain John Kennedy, would assist the Internal Affairs Division with its investigations, sources said. When Zammiara took over the role, he maintained that file access. Marcucci, the spokesperson, said he did so, quote, without permission, unquote. What happened? Zammiara was caught by accident. In 2024, a different issue in the Monroe County Jail prompted an audit within the sheriff's office to determine which employees had access to the department's different file systems. It was during that review that someone noticed Zammiara had been accessing and downloading internal affairs files. During an internal audit of computer usage, we discovered then Sergeant Zammiara may have accessed files without permission, Marcucci, the spokesperson, said. A months-long internal affairs investigation ensued. Investigative Post, through a source, obtained a copy of the 54-page report. The findings were extensive. Over a 6-month period from May 31st to December 13th, 2024, investigators found that Zammiara routinely used his access to internal file systems to look up medical and disciplinary files of colleagues. In April 2025, the investigation concluded he had illegally accessed medical files on 5 occasions and disciplinary files more than 130 times. Several charges indicated Zammiara downloaded files, including body-worn camera footage. Zammiara's unlawful access to files, however, spanned his tenure in the sheriff's coordinator role, according to the sheriff's investigation. You engaged in a course of conduct both on duty and off duty that was unauthorized between January 2022 and September 2024, the report concluded. During said time, you knowingly used erroneously given Monroe County computer network permissions to access MCSO files, which you knew were not part of your job description or official duties to access. After being confronted by his superiors, Zammiara confessed to knowingly and illegally accessing the internal affairs files, according to the report. Shortly after starting your assignment, you admitted you knew your computer access to the file systems was erroneously given to you, the report continued. At that point, you failed to ask for clarification to the nature of your computer access permissions or to bring light of the error to your supervisor for direction and correction. Sources told Investigative Post that those who had their files accessed by Zammiara were sent an email by Sheriff's Office leadership notifying them of what had happened. Each person was then permitted to meet with leadership to discuss the breach of confidentiality. Haynes, the retired deputy, took the meeting. He said he questioned leadership about what investigatory steps were taken. He wanted to know, for example, if Internal Affairs had searched Zammiara's personal laptop and phone to determine if he had kept any of the files he had accessed and downloaded. The answer? No. The investigation ended after Zammiara admitted his wrongdoing. There was no investigation, Haynes said. There was a questioning. That's not an investigation. There's a big difference. Zammiara was placed on paid leave during the inquiry, sources said. Pay records indicate he made $121,000 in 2024. The investigation concluded in April 2025, and he left the following month. The problem of, quote, wandering officers, unquote. In New York, law enforcement officers must be trained by the agencies that hire them in order to be certified for employment. Should an officer resign or be fired in connection with allegations of misconduct, the state strips their certification, preventing them from working elsewhere. That's what happened to Zammiara. But under state rules, he was then permitted to regain certification to work in Erie County. Such decertifications are tracked by the State Division of Criminal Justice Services, which maintains a database to track decertifications. An officer's training certificate is immediately invalidated when an officer is removed for cause for misconduct, according to the division's website, or when an officer has resigned or retired subsequent to or in connection with allegations of misconduct. The database is meant to help the state's 528 law enforcement agencies know who they're hiring. Over the past decade, 1,805 officers have been decertified. That includes 18 officers from the Erie County Sheriff's Office and 4 from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. But the measures in place don't always succeed in preventing problem officers from jumping from one department to another, as chronicled in a series of recent reports by the USA Today Network in collaboration with the S.I. Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. In his statement to Investigative Post, Baxter said he reported Zammiara's resignation to the state as required by law. Kirsten Conley, a spokesperson for the Division of Criminal Justice Services, confirmed that Zammiara's departure was reported as removal for cause on May 23, 2025. Decertification of police officers for misconduct is permanent in New York, thanks to a 2021 law. However, Zammiara, as a jail guard, previously was certified as a peace officer, a different category, and thus was eligible for retraining and recertification. Garcia, Erie County Sheriff, refused to say when and how Zammiara was hired and whether he knew Zammiara had resigned his previous job under a cloud. However, Conley of the State Division of Criminal Justice Services confirmed Zammiara was hired by Garcia's office as a corrections officer November 1st of last year. On December 16th, he successfully completed the basic course for correction officers, Conley wrote in an email, thus earning recertification. One retired sheriff's deputy questioned how Zammiara could regain certification. "We're like, wait a minute, that's impossible," the deputy said. "How do you take a guy who did criminal activity so bad that he was forced to resign with 20 years on, and he could pass the background check?" There is pending state legislation that aims to button down the vetting process for cops. The Wandering Officer Act, introduced in April 2025 by State Senator Cordell Clear of Harlem, would prohibit provisional or permanent appointment of any job candidate who was previously fired by or resigned from a law enforcement agency in any jurisdiction as a result of disciplinary actions or criminal charges. The bill remains in committee. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This next piece is titled "No Consequences for Landlord in Fatal Fire." A University at Buffalo student died last year after a fire broke out in his unpermitted attic apartment. So far, the property owner, Joseph Parlato, has faced no repercussions. And the story is accompanied by a photograph of the home. It's at 16 Merrimack Street, and the caption says, "This is 1 block from UB's South Campus." There's a sign on there are windows boarded on the upper floor of the house, and a rental sign on it that says "Deluxe Housing, 3, 4, 6, and 8-bedroom apartments." It's been a year since a fire destroyed a University Heights house and claimed the life of 25-year-old University at Buffalo student Rameshwar Brahmbhatt after flames and smoke consumed his attic rental, later deemed unfit for human occupancy and not legal habitable space by city inspectors. Nevertheless, the city's housing court last week gave landlord Joseph Parlato yet another month to fix 11 outstanding code violations at 16 Merrimack Street, a block from UB's South Campus. No one mentioned Rameshwar's death at last week's court date. After a brief summary of the violations by City Housing Inspector Brian Higgins, Parlato's attorney assured Housing Court Judge Philip Dabney that they would be remedied soon. In total, the hearing lasted 3 minutes. Housing Court is a standing joke, Fred Brace, a former Housing Court liaison from 2009 to 2021, told Investigative Post, "I'm not surprised. I'm just angry. Nobody cared that somebody actually died in that apartment," said Kubi Brahmbhatt, Rameshwar's sister. "I have faced the biggest loss of my life. It's just another day over there." University Heights resident Adam Nice said Rameshwar's death is the second in an unlicensed rooming house in his neighborhood this year. The first happened a few streets away at 54 Minnesota Avenue, a property with a long history of code violations, owned by landlord Andre Foster. "If properties were being inspected annually, this would have been caught," said Nice. "Inspectors have so much teeth, but they're treating people with kid gloves." According to records, city inspectors neglected to inspect 16 Merrimack for a decade, from 2012 until 2022. On March 21st of last year, about a month prior to the fire, investigators gave the property a passing grade. Lou Petrucci, commissioner of the city's Permits and Inspections Department, has declined to comment on the case, noting that it happened before his tenure as commissioner. Investigative Post previously reported on Parlato's failure to pay $248,283 in property taxes and garbage fees on his portfolio of rentals, to the point that 3 properties were sent foreclosure notices last month. One of his properties, behind on taxes, but not to the point of a foreclosure notice, has been listed for sale. Investigative Post also found that fire marshals failed to note that Rameshwar had died in their investigation and left most of their investigation report blank. Parlato currently has active violations with the city for renting out 2 other attic rooms in University Heights, one right next door to 16 Merrimack, without the proper permit, though neither are being adjudicated in housing court. An Investigative Post reporter confirmed that students were living in one of the properties as recently as last month. To date, Parlato has not been issued any fines in housing court for 16 Merrimack. Sibu Nair is the Deputy Director of Asian American Affairs for Governor Hochul. The role often calls for Nair to advocate for UB's international students and to work with those recently arrived from India. Many find themselves in a housing pinch, Nair said. Under financial pressure and fearful of speaking out, they end up trapped in subpar housing, even if there are problems like mold and lack of heat. It's all about money. The landlords can exploit the students, Nair told Investigative Post. Students don't know their legal rights. They don't understand the building code. They're very scared of coming forward and expressing their concerns. The landlords are definitely taking advantage of that. On June 8th, City Inspector Stephen Rohair went to 16 Merrimack and found that the landlord had addressed 3 code violations, including boarding up its windows and conducting a post-fire asbestos survey. But 11 other code violations had not been corrected. Parlato's attorney, Stephen Townsend, said that most of the violations will be addressed once the city accepts the architectural drawings submitted for review. Petrucci told Investigative Post his department has not received any drawings yet. Jim Andalora, Parlato's property manager, refused to answer questions after the court hearing. Andalora has been cited by inspectors for failing to obtain a required property manager's license. According to city records, housing inspectors have visited 16 Merrimack at least 51 times since 2004. The property failed 18 of those inspections. Records indicate that inspectors did not inspect 16 Merrimack for over 10 years, from 2012 until 2022. When they did return, they cited the property for 2 violations, which were subsequently corrected. Investigative Post has requested the city's inspection report conducted in March 2025. Inspectors gave the property a passing grade 1 month before the fatal fire. Brombaugh said she is considering taking legal action against the landlord. She believes some fault also lies with UB for not looking more closely into Parlato's ubhousing.com operation. It's shocking that the college also doesn't do any sort of checks before they let people post on those websites. It's about their student safety as well, Brombaugh told Investigative Post. Brace, the former housing court liaison, said that it's an ensemble cast failing to hold landlords like Parlato accountable. You have a city inspection department that is not doing their job. You have Dabney as the housing court judge who is not doing his job, Brace said. The system isn't broken, it's non-existent. This piece is titled, "Driver of Abandoned Tesla is an Ex-Cop." Tom George, a former police officer and elected official, is charged with abandoning a car in Niagara Square 2 weeks ago. In the vehicle, police found a loaded gun belonging to DJ Granville, the former Erie County narcotics chief. The driver charged with abandoning a Tesla in which police found a loaded gun belonging to the Erie County Sheriff's scandal-plagued former narcotics chief is himself a former cop. The driver, Thomas George, was a town of Evans police officer for 23 years. A Republican, he also served a 4-year term on the town board from 2020 to 2023, including 9 months as acting town supervisor. His current job is chief operating officer for Buffalo Biodiesel, the company that employs Granville as security court contractor. George, age 60, on May 20th, was charged with 4 traffic violations, according to documents obtained by Investigative Post through a Freedom of Information request, including leaving the scene of an accident. Police sources told Investigative Post that surveillance video captured George exiting a restaurant on Chippewa on the evening of May 19th and driving away in a gray 2022 Tesla sedan registered to Buffalo Biodiesel. The car was assigned to D.J. Granville, the former chief of narcotics for the Erie County Sheriff's Office, who retired in April and has since been working as a security contractor for the company, according to his attorney, Terry Connors. After driving away from the restaurant, George made an improper left turn from Chippewa Street onto Delaware Avenue, according to the charging documents, then failed to stay in his lane on Delaware. He rolled through the stop sign at Delaware and Niagara Square, according to the charges. Finally, he abandoned the vehicle in the street between City Hall and the Robert H. Jackson Federal Courthouse, according to Buffalo Police, who later that evening responded to a 911 call from a federal courts officer. The caller reported a white male wearing a dark blue jacket, light blue shirt, and tan pants, exiting a car that had damage to the front driver's side, according to an incident report. The car was unlocked and still running when police arrived. Officers from the Accident Investigation Unit found Granville's loaded gun in the car's trunk, as well as his prescription medicine, a checkbook, a cell phone, and other belongings, including his sheriff-issued retirement badge. Police also found paperwork bearing the name of George's wife. George reached on his cell phone the day after police found and searched the vehicle, refused to comment, referred Investigative Post to a statement issued by his employer, and hung up. He did not answer a call this morning. Walking away from the car earned George the same charge to which Granville pled guilty last August, leaving the scene of an accident that caused property damage. Granville in April 2024 plowed his county-owned pickup truck into 7 parked cars on Buffalo's west side. Investigative Post, nearly a year later, broke the story of the late-night spree, sparking intense media coverage and a series of investigations that ended in Granville pleading guilty to misdemeanor charges and paying $75,000 in restitution for damage claims paid by the county. He also served a 30-day unpaid suspension and retired in April. Several Buffalo police officers who responded to the scene, including his sister-in-law, at the time a lieutenant, were disciplined for failure to follow procedures in responding to the incident, including failure to administer sobriety tests. The sister-in-law, Lucia Esquilin, was demoted to detective sergeant in December. The day after George abandoned the Tesla in Niagara Square, Granville was charged at the B District Police Station with improper storage of a firearm, a misdemeanor. Granville's gun, a Glock, had a full magazine and 1 bullet in the chamber, according to the police report, which indicated that officers found it in a bag of the car's front trunk. The charges against George are all traffic violations. He is scheduled to appear at the Buffalo Traffic Violations Agency in City Hall on June 25th at 9:30 a.m. This one's titled The Book on Doonesbury, the story behind the creator of the most influential cartoon of its era that's still relevant today, plus Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, and Mel Brooks. Doonesbury doesn't carry the same cachet as it did in its heyday, but it's popular with the readers of this newsletter, as evidenced by the number who click on the link I post to the previous Sunday's cartoon. So imagine my delight at last week's book review in the New York Times on a new biography on its creator, Gary Trudeau, along with an accompanying interview with the reclusive cartoonist. Wrote the Times reviewer, "It's hard to overstate the impact Doonesbury had in the 1970s. Trudeau dragged the knowing hippie sensibility and the tone of a wised-up opinion section onto the playground of the comics page, right alongside Beetle Bailey and the Family Circus. There was nothing else like it. By the middle of the decade, the strip was running in some 450 newspapers, with a total of 60 million readers. His first Doonesbury anthology sold 600,000 copies. Doonesbury is rich with memorable characters, some fictional, some real life. My favorite from back in the day was Fred, the Viet Cong fighter. Uncle Duke, modeled after Hunter S. Thompson, is an especially good one too. Journalist Nicholas von Hoffman once referred to Trudeau as an investigative cartoonist. When I asked Tom Tolles for his thoughts on Trudeau, he referenced the strip's take on cigarette companies in writing, "Arguably the most significant issue Trudeau took on was big tobacco. They pioneered the disgusting misinformation campaigns that have so plagued and eviscerated contemporary civic discourse. He was right to shine his bright light here." And that's the end of that piece. A couple of short pieces. The newly adopted state budget exempts $1.5 billion of spending by the governor from oversight by the comptroller, New York Focus reports. What could possibly go wrong? New York has the third highest child care cost of any state in the nation. An op-ed in the Wall Street Journal offered some smart amendments to the Constitution. Get rid of the Electoral College, impose term limits, place meaningful limits on political contributions, among others. An analysis by ProPublica found the Supreme Court is increasingly making decisions by secret ballot with little to no explanation. Wrote ProPublica, "The Supreme Court's increased willingness to bypass its regular process has empowered President Donald Trump at the same time as the administration has increased use of executive authority. The court has repeatedly greenlit policies of his that lower courts have blocked, and has done so with little to no explanation." The New Republic ranks the nation's 10 best and 10 worst presidents. Lincoln and FDR lead the list. You know who ranks dead last, described as much more corrupt and dangerous to the Constitution than all of the others on this list combined. J.D. Vance is a fan of Richard Nixon and doesn't see what the big deal is with the crimes that brought down his presidency. Quote, "We do a Watergate twice a day," Vance said. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post. We read from the Investigative Post on Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. Your reader has been Jim Michaely. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day of the National Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private not-for-profit organization. As always, please feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, or any questions you may have And please stay with us. Our Buffalo News is going to be coming up in just a moment.
The following program is intended for listeners